how is it that we come to this point? This is the third historical wave of gambling in America, and it's sort of had a boom-bust cycle, and it's in the boom cycle now. And it seems to me that you've been able to have an overview, and would you share with us some of the insights you might have?
Well, I get insights every day as to what gambling does. Incidentally, I've bet on my golf game, and it's cost me money over the years, so it isn't like I've never placed a wager. But I get dozens of letters almost daily from people who have financial difficulties for one reason or another. And the reasons overwhelmingly come from three sources. One is health problems. People run into unexpected medical bills, and it gets them in a tough situation. Second, they get in trouble on credit cards frequently, and a credit card is a temptation to many people. But the third thing I hear about is people that have had an addiction to gambling, and where they've used thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of dollars that the family needs, and they can't get off the hook, and they find themselves in enormous financial trouble. Sometimes that interacts with the credit card situation because they use their credit cards to defer bills and use their cash to feed the casinos. So I've seen just time after time the kind of misery that these people write me about. And incidentally, I get a lot of letters from prisoners too. I seem to be a favorite pen pal of a lot of prisoners. And I got one the other day, for example, where a fellow had stolen, this was extreme, but he'd stolen $2.2 million from his employer to feed a gambling addiction. And he acknowledged it, and he said he was going to spend his time in prison for it. So I think we'll always have some of that. But I think for the state of Nebraska particularly, the state I love, and my family's been here since the 1860s, I think for the state to essentially prey upon its citizens, create more of these addictions, create more of these letters coming to me every day, I just think it's wrong. I don't think, I think it's cynical on the part of a state to raise money from people who basically can't afford it by promising them a dream that is not going to come true for any but the tiniest fraction of the people that participate, and to cause people to get into the kind of trouble that I hear about every day.
You know, I think it's interesting when you talk about it out of the pain that
it's pain.
You have. The government has promoted this as a painless revenue stream. Only the willing are doing it. Another promise that's made is that it's economic development.
There's nothing getting developed. It's a transfer of money. I mean, basically, if you take the losses of everybody that participates in gambling, and it's not gaming, it's gambling, if you take the losses, it will end up going three places. It will end up going to the state as taxes to some degree. That's not development. It will end up paying part of the operating expenses of the operation, but any place you spent the money would pay part of the operating expenses of that establishment, and it'll go to the owners.
Now, you mentioned if we follow the money and if we do the math, you mean the players are losers?
Yeah, well, I mean, just assume that Nebraska had this and our Nebraska money to Nevada and the state.
Could it have an effect then on taking money out of a local economy that might then not be spent on other items?
Well, if Nebraskans lose, just pick a figure, 100 million at casinos. If they lose 100 million, I mean, that's 100 million they don't have to spend on food and toys for their children and movies and everything else. I mean, those are the letters I get. These are people that have been tapped out. It's all gone. In many cases, they've run up balances on their credit cards, and frankly, when I write these people back, I often advise them just to take bankruptcy. I mean, they don't really have an alternative. They're in so deep, and the position of the state of Nebraska should not be to create a whole lot more people that are in that position.
Prison correspondence would mean that there's crime involved. That people...
Addictions produce crime. I mean, addictions produce crime. Not every case, but if you have a large group of people that are addicted to drugs, you're going to have more crime. If you have a large group of people that are addicted to gambling, you're going to have more crime. People get into impossible situations when they get addicted to something like that, and some people will opt for crime, some will opt for bankruptcy. You know, some may commit suicide.
What's an amazing thing is across the nation, though, gambling has been promoted strictly on its benefits. There is no mention of the addiction, the bankruptcy.
Well, there's
the
a lot of
crime.
benefit to the owner. I mean, and there's the occasional lucky person. But for every lucky person, there's hundreds of thousands that just keep feeding the kitty. And net, it's a big loser for the citizenry. It's certainly clear that a given percentage of people will become addicted and use money they've got no business using. And that percentage is not a small percentage.
You'd be implying then that there's a certain value construct that you would apply in terms of evaluating a product or a business, because certainly if to own a casino is the license to print money almost.
Well, I mean, that's what, in the end, if you have the ability to get people to push a button that gives them back 95 cents on average every time they put in $1, and they can push that button time after time after time, that is a license to print money. And that's the reason that they are licensed. The state says we want part of that. But I really don't think that's a good position for the state of Nebraska to be in. You're teaching your citizenry something all the time by the actions you take as legislators and as the administrators of a state like this. And essentially to teach you that the state is on the other side of the transaction from you. They're trying to get you to do something dumb. I just don't think, I think the state ought to be trying to do things for its citizens, not do something to its citizens. That's the one that means the most to me. I mean, I do not think that the state ought to be in the position of selling the needles. You know, I mean, we're going to have drug addicts in this country, but I don't think that the state ought to get in the business where it hopes there's more drug addicts and it starts selling needles. And we're going to have gambling addicts in this country, but I don't think that the state ought to become the sponsor of spreading that addiction. The argument is made, all these people are going over to Iowa, but I would say this, if you had a house with a nice lawn, and you had a neighbor, and they had a Chihuahua, and that dog occasionally strayed over to your lawn and fouled the lawn, your reaction would not be to go out and buy him a St. Bernard. I mean, you know, I mean, you don't need more of it. I mean, it may be something that there are people in Nebraska. I get letters from them that have become addicted to gambling by going across the river. But I will guarantee you that if you open up the floodgates to casinos and various concentrations of slot machines in the state, you will have multiples of the number. You will have the St. Bernards of addicts as opposed to the Chihuahuas of addicts that presently exist.
But you do see the winners that are posted in the newspaper, I won 10,000. Is it a selling of a hope?
It's selling hope. That's exactly what it is. And you know, people sell hope in terms of perfume that you're going to, you know, attract men, or, you know, or facelifts, in terms of whatever it may be. There's a lot of hope being sold in the world. I think it's very cynical of the state of Nebraska to sell false hopes. And if you are taking 1,700,000 people in the state of Nebraska, and you're going to say, on behalf of the state, you're going to say, I want to take hundreds of millions of dollars from practically all of you, so that I can stick a couple people's name up there as winners. I don't think there's anything hardly more cynical than that. You take 1 million people, and 50 of them, or 30, or some number out of that million, are going to change their circumstances dramatically for the better. But you're going to have the other 999,000 plus who are going to lose the ability to take their family to a movie, to buy a toy for their kid at Christmas, or worse yet, become an addict and lose everything they have, including their self-respect, you know, and break up their family. I just think that's a terrible trade-off. Tom, every Nebraskan will have a chance to say what kind of a state they want to craft for their children. I mean, they can. That's what the ballot is doing, and in the process, they're teaching their children something about the kind of state they want to have. They're teaching about what government should be all about, and you know, that's what we have a democracy for.